Welcome to the Creative Liberty Podcast. I'm your host, Major Chisholm, and in the studio with me today is a woodworker. His name is Nate Lamb. Nate, welcome, bud. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day outside, and I get to spend time talking to you, Major.
I know. This is a treat, seeing that we are in our respective homes per government order.
Yeah, I know. Unique times.
I've joked on the last couple of podcasts. These are kind of the segment of podcasts for the Creative Liberty Podcast will be the Quarantine Chronicles, and so
yeah.
Nate's coming to me live from his house, and I'm live from my kitchen, and so here we are.
Here we go. Awesome.
So as we just jump right into it, just give me and the audience your story as that kind of, leads you up to where you are today. And then we'll talk later about where you'd like to see that go.
Yeah. So the beginning of this is probably not the typical, I guess, in that sense. So I didn't have a lot of woodworking experience when I decided to just jump into this whole thing. So a few years ago, I got laid off from my job and decided to take a chance and kind of go at woodworking without really any experience at all, besides a pretty simple picture frame and some other crappy things that I made, to be honest. And so that was, about 3 years ago now. And that's kind of where I got started. So my neighbor was moving, and he was just like, "Hey, you want this router and this jigsaw and I think a few other tools, like Harbor Freight quality
Sure.
type things, which there's a lot of great Harbor Freight tools actually. So no slam on them, but and so I was just kind of like, hey, let's see what happens with this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how it all got started. So
that's awesome. So were you? My first question is, are you good at math? Because I would think you'd have to be really good at math.
Yeah. So yes and no. I definitely, I'm realizing as I talk to more and more people that, you kind of think that everyone thinks like you for a little while. Then as you talk to people, you're like, oh, maybe this is a little different. But, so I'm definitely one of those people that can kind of like reverse engineer, and like implode things in your mind of how it was put together.
Oh, okay.
And so I can pretty well like visualize how something would be assembled in my head, I guess. I don't think that necessarily makes me good at math. I didn't do well at math in high school. And I mean, in college I did a little bit better, but my background's actually kinesiology. So there's some math and physics in there, dealing with kinetics, but it definitely wasn't my strong suit, I guess, in that sense.
Okay.
But I was kind of always a tinkerer. How about that? As a person.
Yeah.
So.
Taking things apart and putting them back together, or just leaving them apart.
Or just leaving them apart sometimes. And the curiosity is what drives. Like, I wonder how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely one of those people that would be like, yeah, I think I could make that. That kind of like, I don't know, thinking.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, wasn't a math pro.
Right. I'm a recovering bagaholic, and every time I see a new bag or something, I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't have this and this. Man, I just need to make my own bag, and then I can create it in my mind, and then I think, well, now I'm going to need a factory, and I'm going to need some way to manufacture it, and I'm like, nah, forget it. So that's what as far as it gets.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Where you're like, I could do that. And then you're like, oh, well, that takes thousands of dollars worth of tools just to do that simple thing.
Exactly.
I'll just buy it, I guess.
Yeah. So what type of woodworking do you do?
I would I would label myself, I think, as like a hybrid woodworker. Um, and I guess I probably am stealing that term from someone that I did a lot of, that was influential on me, I guess, early on. But like the Wood Whisperer has a book out called The Hybrid Woodworker. But it's essentially like this. I mean, you kind of use whatever's available to you to be able to make something. So,
Mm-hmm.
you have the purists out there that are just purely working with hand tools. They are planes and chisels, and that's about, that's it. And they make everything that way. I'm definitely not that far. And yeah, so I make stuff with both, power tools and hand tools. And and yeah, so yeah, so I'm not a purist, but I'll use whatever's available to me. I'm also not, I'm a one man shop. There's nothing else, there's no one else really in there, and I don't use any like CNC machines. Not that I'm against them. I just, haven't gone that far yet. So I'm definitely not a CNC shop either. So everything is handcrafted and designed by me. But yeah, but I will use basically any sort of tooling that I can find to be able to do that. So
Sure.
yeah.
And what is it specifically that you make?
I make wood furniture. So, right now in where I'm at, it's mainly coffee tables and tables and, plant stands. And, there's a few odds and ends, picture frames and things along that line, as well. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's kind of up and coming and growing. So, um, and, and dabbling in a little bit of other things as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah.
What's what's the worst thing you've ever made?
Uh, um, so at the time I didn't realize it was the worst thing I ever made. Um, but over time, and that's a lot of times, woodworking is really like you can make something look pretty in
Mm-hmm.
the first like week of its existence, but it's
Right.
like really the long haul on whether or not you're a craftsman of the of the field or not. I feel like so before I would actually call myself a like generally pursuing like woodworking as like an everyday adventure. I was like, well, I'll try to make um, some Christmas gifts out of like these free tools that my neighbor gave me, type of thing.
Right.
And I made these soap dishes. So I was like, yeah, it's great. Soap dishes. I was like thinking in my head, like it needs to be like, fairly water resistant, like wood type. Like, and so I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, I did a lot of like house maintenance and things along that line. I redid some siding, and cedar was supposed to be good for like water resistance and mold. So I was like, I have some leftover cedar. I'll make it from that. And so I made them. They looked kind of cool, like design like they weren't like that boring or anything. But and gave them all my family. It was like some stuff I made, and I mean, within like 3 months, they're all like broken and busted apart because the water just got in them and swelled them. And they just busted all to pieces. So, yeah. So I felt pretty bad, except for my mom. I think my mom's probably the only one that still has one,
Mm-hmm.
because she's my mom, and that's what moms do.
Of
They
course.
keep all the little crappy stuff that you make.
You went over to
So,
her house and it was up on the refrigerator.
yeah, exactly. It got it. She glued a magnet on the back
Yeah.
of it. Hunger a soap dish, but this broken up magnet. So.
Right there with your ashtray from third grade.
Yeah,
Made out of
exactly.
clay.
Made out of clay. That's yeah, exactly. Yep.
Oh, that's great.
So
Um, so kind of along that same line, what's one thing you're most proud of that you've made?
yeah, that's a good question. Um, I feel like the curse of any like novice profession is you look back at stuff and you're always kind of like, wow, I can make that better
Right.
now. But I think um pretty so I started like I kind of made all this like little stuff like the soap dishes and I made like a couple picture frames. Um and actually, the picture frame behind me is one of my, like, I think second things that I ever made.
Okay.
No one else can see that, but I made some stuff, but like I wasn't really at that point like really pursuing anything. So about like maybe probably like 2 or 3 months into actually like making um, actually kind of pursuing doing this, I made a dining room table. So it was really only like probably the third thing that I actually made ever. And it's like the Mazovo dining room table. And that that's probably one of the things that I I'm probably most proud of in the sense, mainly just because I was able to make it after just a few months of really looking at the craft, I guess. So it's
Right.
more of like kind of a hidden thing from from like my side, but it had some fairly complex joinery in it and just problems that to solve, I guess. So I one of the early guys that I kind of interviewed and talked to was a guy that basically he's like, if you're not scared the entire time, you're probably not pushing yourself in woodworking. And like I was making it out of walnut, which at that time, like walnut was really expensive for wood, and so I was like, every cut I make like, counts because I don't,
Right.
you're just kind of starting out and trying to figure stuff out. So you are like I was scared to death like the whole time of like making this dining room table, and it turned out like yeah, pretty well, and it's actually part of my my resell like product line and stuff now. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
cool.
What style is there a style of furniture that you make, or do you do different styles, or is there a certain style?
Yeah. Yeah. So I try to, if I'm designing the piece, it's, I try to design in more of a Danish Scandinavian style. And I really, I like it. Dieter Rams is the guy that has influenced me from like a design perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, yeah, I would say more along that like lighter, um, the mid-century Scandinavian era and everything. So there's some like Japanese influence into it. There's a lot of just um, a lightness about the pieces
Uh-huh.
that I really like. So back at that time when it became more popular, I guess, or in the mid-century area, it became more popular in the United States, I'd say. It was right after World War II like has ended and people are coming out of kind of the impact from that, and then we're looking at space and sending people to the moon, and so there was kind of this idea that we were like invincible kind of, and
Right.
everything had this like levitating. So you look at good Scandinavian mid-century Danish design, and it kind of should appear that it's like floating or very light and airy. And that's part of, I don't know, I like all of that as far as just with the design and everything. So
Yeah.
pretty fun.
And what's your Instagram? Because I've seen some of your work on Instagram and it's beautiful. So
Yeah.
if people wanted to go check out your work.
Oh, sure. So the name of my company is Woolly Furniture. Two O's, two L's, and a Y. I realized after taking the name that there's like 6 different ways to spell Woolly, which so telling someone audibly, yeah. So it's just Woolly_Furniture for my Instagram account. And yeah, so yeah, feel free to check it out. Check it out there.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have a website, or is it
I
just
do.
Instagram?
I do. It's woollyfurniture.com.
Okay.
So
WOOLEY, right?
no,
Okay.
WOOLLY. Two
LLY.
O's, two
Two
L's.
O's.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I see. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
It's
And
there's a
and
lot of ways to do it.
yeah, and I know that you and I have had this conversation, but for the sake of our audience, why the name Woolly Furniture?
Oh yeah. So my last name is Lamb.
Right.
And 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 I didn't really lamb furniture just didn't sound that great. So I was like, oh, I can play off of woolly, and give the essence of fleece and also have kind of a catchy name. So
Gotcha. So not
um,
so more of lamb's wool, not
yes,
woolly mammoth.
not woolly mammoth. Yeah. Technically, my logo kind of played off of the woolly mammoth like idea and everything, but yeah, kind of the name was promoted by my last name of Lamb, so
Gotcha.
more of the woolly lamb
Okay.
aspect. Yeah, yep,
Nice.
it's kind of fun. It's I've so my I almost went with like Swinson or something along that line actually, just because it's very Scandinavian sounding, and but it's also that's my mother's maiden name, so
Oh, okay.
I am actually half Danish. So um, my yeah, so, it all kind of fits in there.
Nice. Um, so what's your favorite type of wood to work with? Or does it
Um, yeah,
depend on the project?
it does. It depends on the project a little bit. I really enjoy working with walnut.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it has a Scandinavian flair to it. I mean, you see a lot of Scandinavian furniture in teak. Teak is just asinine expensive, so and it's also like fairly hard to work with. It just chips out really easily and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that while you're working with it. Um, Walnut's like nice and buttery, for lack of a better term. You don't get a lot of tear out with it, um, and it's super simple to work with in that sense. And the grain and everything just looks absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah.
So I love kind of that darker wood. I love that the sapwood on it is also a light, so you can get a lot of the contrast in there. So you can play with a lot of the wood figure and everything while working with it. So it's so I'd say right now walnut,
Okay.
but white oak is also growing on me. So, but
Oh.
yeah, it kind of depends on the project.
So what kind of woods go with different projects?
Um, Good question. It's so I haven't. Let me restart there. So I think a lot of it depends on the customer and what you're looking for, just aesthetically what goes with your house and decor and different things like that. But there is, I mean, some elements of woods that people do or don't like. I like walnut because it generally stays. The tannins in it, like there's not a lot of release. It's pretty dark to start with once you get the finish on it, and it stays fairly dark. There's not a lot of change in it. In comparison to like cherry or something like that, it actually almost has like an orangish hue kind of when you first mill it up. And then it turns this darker color like over time. And can if you have like a glass or something sitting on it or a vase or something and it's by a window and it starts to like oxidize and the tannins and everything start releasing different colors and it really like you'll take that vase away and there'll be like a ring right there where the sun wasn't able to reach it. So there's things like that kind of can affect that overall thing, but for like a really outdoor indoor is kind of the main thing that you're thinking about. So an open celled wood isn't the greatest for an outdoor piece of furniture unless it's constantly covered and going to be out of the rain.
Right.
And so that's so I lean more like white oak is so like red oak is a open cell wood and white oak is a closed cell wood. And so like just in those two differences, you can make a piece that lasts longer. Teak, part of its advantages is that it has a lot of just natural properties that allow it to last a long time. So and outdoors, you see actually a lot of patio furniture and things along that line made out of it. And yeah, so it just depends really on the preference of the customer in that sense, what they like. But if I had my option, I would probably do like a white oak or something because I really like the look of white oak. It's growing. It's not terribly popular actually in the United States yet. I'm hoping it grows. I think it's going to be the new walnut. I feel like there's always a favorite wood depending on what generation you talk to. Yeah, so I would say like for outdoor furniture, I'd use like a white oak, something along that line. And like indoor, I really like the look of like walnut and stuff. So it's yeah.
Okay.
So it kind of depends on
Yeah.
the customer and what they like from like a dark to light species. So,
Right. And as you know, I'm a painter, and I
mm-hmm.
build my canvases out of birch and pine. The border
Hmm.
is pine, and thank you. You actually helped me with choosing the right tools and stuff to shore those up so that I don't have to use nails. Um, but for longevity's sake, am I using the right wood? Like in 100 years, is that pine gonna buckle or bow, or if I made it correct, is the wood gonna wear down?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you have hardwoods and softwoods, right? So pine would be a softwood. Some woods come in both. So like maple can come in a hard or a soft. And I primarily use hardwoods. I mean, they are considered, I mean, the naming is appropriate, I guess. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they won't dent as easily and wear and tear. For the most part, it depends on what it's going to be used for. So like something like a coffee table that's going to see a lot of wear. Using pine for my aesthetic in particular, it's really clean lines and stuff. It's using something like pine probably won't last the best. It also can absorb and release moisture differently, but it really depends on how you finish it too. So and how you jointed it. So an end grain to end grain joint is generally weaker. So that's in like your picture frames or something like that. So reinforcing an end grain to end grain um, joint is a smart move. On a picture frame, most of the time there's actually not enough resistance that you're going to need anything additional. But it's probably smart to like add a spline or something along that line to reinforce like that joint. Or some dowels or something that will help give integrity to that joint. And so it depends on how it depends probably on the joinery a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But if something's going to be beat up a lot, like a coffee table, and people put feet up on it, your kids smash around books on it or whatever. Going with a hardwood is probably going to give me for a dining room table. Going with a hardwood is probably a better option there, and things. But pines, it's a really good way to learn a craft. So I test a lot of woodworking is testing out your jig or whatever it is. So I'll test pieces out on pine or on different less like cheaper woods. Like popular is a really good one too. So it depends. If you're going to paint your project, then using something like poplar is a pretty inexpensive wood. It takes paint really well. There's not a lot of grains. It's fairly like close shell on appearance. So there's not you paint oak and you can kind of see a lot of the divots and stuff in there, like red oak. But popular is really clean. So if you're going to paint your project, poplar is like a softer wood, but it's harder than pine. But it doesn't in my perspective, it doesn't have a great appearance. So a lot of times it'll appear green or something like that. That doesn't look the best if you're not going to paint it. But it also you can soak it out in the sun and it'll darken it up quite a bit too. So
Okay.
um, yeah, I
So
don't know if I actually answered your original question.
yeah, I don't care about your coffee table. I want to know if my paintings are going to last.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, if you reinforced your joints and assuming that you did like a miter edge, um, assuming that you did an end grain to end grain joint,
Right.
if you reinforced them, I'd say that they would last. They'd last a good time. It kind of depends on how far they span, and that kind of thing. And the person that's honestly mounting them on their wall, if they have a single point of of contact, like so a single hold point like in the middle, and they're just
Right.
hanging it on the wood,
Yep.
that might bow over time,
Okay.
and stuff. But you can generally get away with like a 3/4 inch um, hardwood shelf or plywood or something of that nature that would stretch a bookshelf of about 3 feet, and you'd be okay for sagging, even with like a books on it. Um, but so it really depends on the size and the span of whether or not it's going to show the test of time. But if you reinforce those joints, those end grain joints, and gave an adequate like hanging point,
Right.
so that it's not all on one point, depending on the span length. Then yeah, I would say there's no reason that something up on the wall like that wouldn't stand the test of time.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that
So
would have, handle a fall. I don't know, but
Yeah. Right. So instead of just putting a nail on the wall and hanging it from the top back, the top of the canvas, I guess, the side, top
yeah,
of the side, but actually doing the eyelets and putting wire and hanging it from the wire. So it's the tension's pulling from the two sides instead of just the top.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly, exactly. Or even just giving 2 points of contact up on the top rim, even if,
Mm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that, like, so that way they're closer to the edges, the support spot, versus like just one in the middle
Gotcha.
could add a lot of life to whether or not it starts drooping over time. And we're talking years. I mean, it probably look fine for 2 to 5 years, and then over time, especially if you're using like a 4/4 or the end milling of 3/4 of an inch thick. So that matters too. If you're using a good 8/4, like a 2 inch thick piece for your framing, that's going to obviously have a lot more support to it than using a 3/4 inch piece of wood.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Good to know for posterity's sake.
yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned a guy earlier, Dieter Rahm. Is it?
Yeah.
Am I saying his name right? Is it Dieter?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's German, so you kind of have that IE
Gotcha.
like type of thing. But yeah.
So my question is, who inspires you now? Who as a woodworker, who do you look for inspiration? Where do you go to find it?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I think early on, I mean, you just search. I mean, I'm just searching anything. I gather random information from anywhere. But early on, I would say like the Wood Whisperer, Mark Spagnolia, something like that. His last name's kind of funky, but I mean, most people know him by the Wood Whisperer. If you say that name but mainly because he's been doing it for so long before it was cool, like posting videos on how tos and things along that line, and just a great resource on like what tools to buy, what testing out different things, comparison between finishes, all that kind of stuff. He just is a wealth of knowledge, and I would like. So he's super. Even now, like I'll, if I'm looking to buy a new tool or compare different things, like I'll go and see if he's done any analysis on it and comparison. And because he videos it all and gives a really good explanation of why he chooses what he chooses and the pros and cons of everything.
Yeah.
So he's great. And from like a learning perspective, like great. Someone who I would want to be when I grow up would be probably Philip Morley. He's a woodworker in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And just insane. I mean, everything that he does is just so meticulously designed out and thought through. Everything is so clean from his like cuts and finishes to his end application. Like as far as like how he's because woodworking is interesting. I mean, it's kind of the craft that's been around for thousands of years, and so you have a lot of ways of doing things. But the way that his like final execution on stuff is just so beautiful. I love that he's a one-man shop, and he makes like 3 to 7 projects a year for different people, and they're all great. And he's also starting to get into like more of my design aesthetic too. So like it's even more fun that way to see how he's designing in a similar style that I'm designing in. And yeah, so definitely I'd say him. And then Peter Roms like is also, hopefully I'm pronouncing it right too, a German designer.
Sure.
But he has like his 10 principles of good design. And he designed, things like radios and different things. It wasn't actually around furniture, but I love his mentality of a way of thinking about something from a design perspective, and so that has been influential for me. Different books even. So were really helpful resources like Understanding Wood Finishes by Bob Flexner, like Understanding Wood. So it's like from like a woodworking perspective. So it's like how different species will change and morph, and how you reinforce them, and what like the different like elements of just wood in general. Because that's really what you are as a woodworker, is you're understanding a material type to a large degree, and how it's going to morph and change over time, and then being able to manipulate that so that it stands the test of time, and that it does what it's supposed to do. It functions. It's also beautiful, and that's a lot of actually Deuteronomy's 10 principles. Like basically don't fail to make something beautiful if it's also functional. Right. But there's also a book like Complete Illustrated Guide to Joinery. I feel like joinery was like the big when you absolutely know nothing. You're just like, what does this mean? How does someone do this? And so like that book by like Gary Rogowski or something, and was super helpful. But yeah, but I mean, I'm a YouTuber at heart, so like I think it's from like I flipped a house, and it's like you're doing everything yourself. So you watch like 20 videos and average them together, and then try it out. Right. So there's a lot of trial and error in there. But those, yeah. But if I could be anybody, I would love to be like Philip Morley. I think he's an amazing woodworker, just really true to the craft, and just a really cool guy in general too. Just seems like a really good guy.
Nice, thanks. Hey, we're going to take a break and listen to a sponsored message from our sponsor. We have a sponsor, but so we'll be right back with Nate Lamb, a woodworker. And just hang out. We'll be right back. Hey, and welcome back. We're here with Nate Lamb today, and we're talking about woodworking, and we're going to jump right back into it. So let me see. I've prepared some questions. You've answered most of them. Hey, what type of tools would someone need if they wanted to start woodworking? Whether it's like just somebody completely starting, or like the most essential tools. So kind of a two-part question. What are the most essential tools to get? And then why would you use them, and what for? Because like I said, I build my frames, and what's the thing, the band with the four corners that you told me to get, and I did, and it holds it, makes it square. What's that?
Yeah. Like, yeah. It's just a band clamp.
A band clamp. Yeah.
Yep.
Phenomenal. Love it.
Yeah, good.
And
it worked out for you.
I'm not a woodworker, but I've got some tools. But every time I would be using something, you or someone else would say, "Oh, but if you had this, you could do that better and easier." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so for people listening who want to get into woodworking, regardless of what they want to do, what are those basic tools that they should use or get or invest in, so that they're not going, "Oh, well, I wished I hadn't bought a jigsaw. I should have bought a router." Things like that.
Yeah.
And go.
It's a really good question. And honestly, one that I looked up so many times. Like, I don't know how many times I searched, bare essential tool set for a beginning woodworker, that kind of thing. Because it really wasn't that long ago that I was searching that. And so a lot of it's still fresh in my mind, and I am still learning from. It's like I have a lot of regret purchases, and things that I'm like, oh man, if I would do this all over again, I definitely would have done, this instead. I guess, I'm gonna assume a few things here. Sure. That if someone, because I had some construction experience, I guess, before getting into all this. So, I had like some drills, and I had like a little construction table saw, and stuff like that. So, and again, I'll talk about that a little bit too, because there's definitely, you have your construction tools, and then you have like woodworking tools,
right?
And a lot of times they're at different calibers. So, there's a whole level of, having a tool set, and then having that same tool set at a higher level or higher
Right.
grade. So there's a lot of levels to this, but I'm gonna assume that people have like some general tools, like you have like a drill set, maybe an impact and stuff. You have a tape measure. You have maybe a construction square or something. Like, I mean, there's a lot of layers to that. Uh, so it also depends a lot on what you're looking to make. So, you start off in almost every new project that I get, I'm going to probably buy a new tool. And I think there's a lot of excitement for most woodworkers or whoever. You're like, yes, like if I build this myself, then I can buy this thing that I've always wanted
Exactly.
to have.
Right.
So that's always like, I mean, there's very few projects that I get into where I don't end up acquiring something new. And which is part of the fun. But so I guess starting from absolute scratch, like say if you had absolutely nothing
Sure.
at all, like not even those general tools, like I mean, stuff to make sure things are accurate. So woodworking depends a lot on your accuracy. So it would be, like I mentioned, like probably a drill set, simple thing, drill holes, and probably clamping, like clamps, depending on the project type. That could look different. Like those strap clamps are really good for picture frames, boxes, even like things like doing like cabinets and things along that line. Just something that can wrap around. But then just straight clamps, parallel clamps, anything to basically hold two things together is going to be helpful. I mean, it's like it's a pretty normal thing to say in woodworking, like I never have enough clamps because and building just gluing together a panel, some pieces of wood, like I may use 20 clamps
Right.
on that one piece, and so it's just getting all right. So some general things like that. But I think a lot of times when people ask that question, they're really looking for like what power tools do I need to buy, and
Exactly.
what ones are kind of worth it.
Right.
Um, and that's the hard. You'd see in the woodworking community like two separate lines of thought. Woodworkers that are kind of table saw centric.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the center of the shop is the table saw. And then you'd see other ones that are bandsaw centric. So you have two lines of thought there. Um, and so it really gets into what accessories do you want to really add on to this particular tool that make it worthwhile, and what kind of projects you're really looking to make, whether or not you really want to go, more of a bandsaw route or maybe more of a table saw route.
Right.
But if I were to give my list, I would probably buy first, um, uh, you know, probably a router, a miter saw, then a bandsaw, a table saw, and then maybe a lathe.
Okay.
Um, and those are like big guys, those are
Right.
like main tool set. And the main reason for that is on a bandsaw. So I lean more towards bandsaw and routering than I would actually especially for the stuff that I make. I make a lot of things with curved joints, so I'm not just sliding it through the table saw.
Right.
It's and I use the table saw in milling, and that gets into a whole separate thing. So if you're looking to do your own milling, meaning like you're taking a rough sawn piece of wood and you are making it so that it's squared up,
Hmm.
so that's usable, because that's essential in any sort of accurate pieces. So there's kind of two levels here in that sense. So um, if you can buy stuff that's S4S, so it's squared up on all four sides already for you. It's more expensive because wherever you're buying it from has done the work or purchased it that has already done the work. Or you can buy stuff in S2S. A lot of times that's how you get it from the lumber store. Um, uh, like from not like a big box store like Home Depot or something, but from like your local like lumber store. It's
Uh-huh.
usually your S2S. It's squared up on two sides.
Okay.
Um, and or so. there's that, and then you can also just get stuff like raw milled. It's not squared up anywhere. It's straight off of like a big mill, and you're buying a big slab of wood. That's typically how I buy my wood. It's the least expensive. For the most part, even though live edge has gotten really popular and so increased the cost, um, but that's kind of how I buy my wood. So there's different tool sets depending on what level you're really going at. But if I were to start all over, I'd probably save and not buy a planer and a jointer um, yet. But I would, and then I would just buy my wood S4S, so already kind of squared up for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would probably go that route, and then acquire those things later. But a router, the reason why I say router is really important, and probably one of the first things that I would buy on my list, is that you're able to use the router in a lot of different ways. So you can use the router as a jointer. That's actually how I jointed my first table. A 7 foot long table, the one that I made, and I didn't have a joiner that could do that and at all. And so I built that table without any sort of milling tools. Like I had a router and I had a really cheap bandsaw, and I made that table off of it. And it's actually, I mean, it's the one on my site. Like that's my first table.
Okay.
So and that's it. And so you can do a lot of stuff with a router and a bandsaw. You can cut out all those different angles, and then you can make templates to then route them out on your router and your table with like a flush trim router bit, like a bearing guided one. And so you can do a lot of stuff that way. And yeah, so that's kind of why I land on that. You can joint edges for your tabletops. You can route out different shapes. You can plunge into wood and make cutouts for slot inserts or screws or whatever. You can do a lot of things with just a router. And I think it's probably one of the most versatile tools that you can get and apply for a lot of different ways. And so I would definitely go with that. The bandsaw is just because you can cut out anything. You can take your rough sawn pieces and break them down into your smaller components really easily. It doesn't need something stable. So if your board is all warpy, you can rip it down, and it's not as critical that way. You can cut out different shapes and different bandwidths. You can resaw pieces of wood. So if you have a 1 inch thick piece of wood and you're wanting 1/2 inch pieces of wood, you can run it down the bandsaw and cut it into 2 1/2 inch. So it can multiply your wood really well. And yeah, so I would definitely kind of a router and bandsaw fan. But if you're wanting to do stuff that's squared up and are fairly straight, so like framing and that kind of thing, then you can make a lot of jigs on a table saw. And so that's why it's still on the list.
Okay.
And stuff. So it's really nice to have as well. So I can see both threads of thought of being table saw or bandsaw centric, but I think the router kind of doesn't get the accreditation it deserves. Like I never saw a router in any beginning list, but it really is an amazing tool that you can do a lot of different things with.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many layers to this. So if I go into hand tools, so I'm actually not a big hand tool person. But if I didn't have like an accurate square, a card scraper, like a pole saw of some sorts, or just like a smaller hand saw and like a flush cut saw. I use planes pretty minimally, but that's something I'm learning is actually more handy than what I initially anticipated. But like I would definitely look into card scrapers. They are amazing. And like some sort of flush cut saw, and making sure you have a good accurate square is a super big deal. So
I have no idea what a card scraper is. What is a card scraper?
Oh yeah. So a card scraper is just basically, it's nothing fancy. It's like a piece of metal. And basically you create a burr on it, and it's kind of in replacement for sanding to some degree.
Oh, okay.
So you can sand and scrape. And I also have a rasp that's really handy too for shaping things. It's I can't remember the name of it actually off the top of my head, but It's basically a bandsaw blade that's bent into a rasp, so all the shavings go through it, so it doesn't get clogged up easily, and you can shape a lot of different elements like with that as well. But the card scraper is just basically a burred piece of metal, and you can reburr it. That's kind of how you sharpen it.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a little bead of metal, and then you kind of bend it and push it over the piece of wood, usually along with the grain generally.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just gives you these little shavings. So it's kind of this kind of a handheld plane in a way,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's really, it gives you a nice clean. It cuts the fibers of wood really clean, versus like sanding like fuzzes them.
Right.
So you get a really clean cut with a card scraper.
Okay.
But I also use it to clean out like wood grooves and go like a lot like, or sorry, not like smaller areas of wood. So you can get
Uh-huh.
gooseneck shaped, round ones, like different shapes of these. But to clean out like glue squeeze out, I'll
Mm-hmm.
use the card scraper a lot and that kind of thing. So yeah, super handy.
Nice. Okay. If I just wanted to build birdhouses with my kids, what tools would I need?
Which goes, well, if you're building birdhouses with your kids, you're probably buying a lot of wood that finished,
Right.
that kind of thing. So, I would say your drill, and some sort of like miter saw. It could just even be one of those simple box like cut ones. You buy them that they give you the like your 90-degree or 45, and hand saw. Really don't need a whole lot of specialty. You can build a lot with just simple tools like that. So
Yeah.
um,
I just wanted to
yeah,
touch on the complete novice. Like, hey, I just want to build some
yeah,
birdhouses with my kids. I don't need I
hmm
don't need a planer and a router.
yeah. No, it's true. If you're looking to do that, then yeah, a really, like my miter saw that I've used for most of the time was just this, you know, like cheaper Hitachi miter saw. It was dead accurate at a 90-degree cut,
Yeah.
and that's what I kind of need. And honestly, I used that up until like a few weeks ago. I just finally upgraded. So,
Yeah.
it's done its weight. So
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think that's the beauty of it is a lot of people get in it just doing stuff like either with their kids or just something on the side. And they're like, I really like this and I want to invest in it. And then they can work their ways up to kind of some
yeah,
of those bigger tools like you were talking about. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
It's good to know. Um, transitioning to do your kids help out in the in the shop, or how is
Yeah,
your family involved? Have you ever
yeah.
made something and your wife's like, oh, I really like that, and you're like, yeah, but that's for a client, and and she's like, I want
Yeah,
could you make me one? So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, so I do like my kids love being out in the shop. They kind of each have their own ear protection and
mm-hmm.
masks and all
Good.
that kind of stuff when they're out there. And so yeah, and then there's certain tools that I'll allow. There's like I'll allow them to use like by themselves without like I'm there, okay,
Sure.
but they're
Sure.
not allowed to be in the shop without me being there. But
Right.
it's they like they'll use like the drill press and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that just to make holes. Like these are awesome.
Yeah.
My kids are like 4 and 7, so they just like they love just drilling holes in a piece of wood.
Right.
There's my scrap bucket. They're just allowed to kind of go and take anything that they want out of there and make whatever they want. And I'll allow them to use like a finish nailer or something like that with me like holding it there to make sure it's safe and they're aiming it in the right way
Right.
and different stuff like that. Just like because it's good. I mean, they love being able to be out and like making stuff. And I'll have them draw on a piece of wood or something, and then I'll cut it out on the bandsaw or something for them. So they
Mm-hmm.
have, and then they'll take the sand, like a hand sander, like a piece of sandpaper, and then they'll sand down the edges so they're not sharp and just different stuff like that. So they love being out there. It's a hard thing, like because you also want to make sure that they're safe, but you
Right.
want to give them like responsibility and ownership of what they're doing
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
stuff. But yeah, they love it. We're just kind of starting a thing where on Saturdays, they can come out to the shop, and I'll work with them directly, and then they can work with their own project at their own little table, like out in the
Oh,
shop,
fun.
that they can like work on it during the week,
Uh-huh.
and then ask me questions or whatever. Because I love like seeing them learn, and like that like click of like thought. It's like, oh, if I do this, like then I can do this, and the both of my kids just love making things, so it's really fun. Um, yeah, and then my wife is also a photographer, so she, does a lot of photography for, or all of it so far, of all the pieces, and which is really nice because she can give that artistic shot
Right.
on the pieces. So like any photography that's up on my website is all done by her, which is really nice.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, I mean, it's um, like there's a lot of pieces that that are inspired. I mean, we make stuff for our own home, so all the pieces I would be like, I would love to have this in my own home. I have a lot of the stuff that I've built sitting in my house,
Yeah.
as well. So there's yeah, there's a lot of bonus to that too.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's cool. Um, we we don't have kids, and but yeah, I can't wait to get my kid out in the studio and save their little paintings or their drawings and put them up, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That'll be great. Um,
Yep.
uh, what's been the hardest? Well, let's see. You already asked that question. I got my show notes here in front of me. Oh no, wait, maybe not. What's been the hardest thing to figure out while working on something?
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, kind of, honestly, it's probably the joinery. I think, I mean, and just because, like right now, I'm working on this bed design, and I want a certain aesthetic with it,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't figure out a good way to create that aesthetic. Wow, because it's a bed, it's a large piece of furniture. So I need to make it so that it's able to be broken down and like taken in and out of rooms.
Right.
And so like I'm just, I'll think through a lot of that, just how to create the joinery in a way that's that will stand the test of time, but yet at the same time, like be able to be like broken down and still give the aesthetic lines that I want on the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that from the design perspective. But then there's also like, okay, I now have this design, I know how to do it, but how can I do it with my tool set? It's,
Right.
it's, or do I need to buy a new tool? Is it worth that, type of thing? And so a lot of it comes down to joinery, for me, and honestly finishes. That same guy, that I kind of interviewed at the beginning of doing all of this, he's like, I don't start on a project till I know exactly how I'm going to finish it, because it's like I was making this bench, one time, and I put on a finish, and I ended up hating it, and it was pretty intricate, and there's a lot of little grooves and stuff, and it took me a solid week straight of just sanding it all back down and off.
No.
And so I lost like a good 20 hours of resanding this piece, because I didn't finish it in the way that I wanted. So
Right.
and yeah, so there's a lot there, but I would say between figuring out how my design is going to be jointed, without losing the design that I want,
Mm-hmm.
and then finishing, is probably like the two hard parts
Yeah.
for me.
Is there prep work that goes into it? Like, say, like, so with the finishes and stuff, and we can talk about finishes here in a second, but like, do you just grab a scrap piece of wood and go, okay, this is the same type of wood, I'm going to put this finish on it to see if I like it? Like, do you do that, or like, do you test out different things first? You're like, okay, that'll work, and then you go back to your good wood.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's exactly it. So I mean, woods, again, this gets along with that, you know, uh, like understanding how a wood will react, and stuff. So like maple, I mean, one reason that I love working with walnut is I know my finish for walnut,
Right.
and it's so I know how I'm going to do it, and it's done. I know it's going to look good, and it's fairly simple. Um, and so working with a new wood, I'm always having a test out period of, okay, like, let's try this finish, see what it looks like. I'll set it out in the sun, see how it ages. With like just testing everything out so I know how it's going to react once I put the finish on. And then, I mean, you have the finish itself, and then you have how you apply the finish, and stuff. So, I'll test out different ways of applying the finish to see how it reacts differently on a piece of wood, and everything, so that I know when I actually apply it to the piece that it's going to be the desired output that I want. So,
Gotcha.
a lot of time. I mean, a lot of times goes into it. You start getting why these pieces, become expensive really quick. I guess
Right.
from that perspective, it's like,
Right.
you can take hours doing seemingly very simple tasks. So
Yeah.
but
It's no
yeah,
it's no IKEA furniture.
yeah, it's they yeah, it's
Not to knock
you
IKEA,
can.
but
I mean, they have a lot of good design. I mean, they
yeah.
really do, and it's yeah. I mean, it's there's there's just so many ways to do stuff.
Oh,
So
it's one of a kind, you know.
it is, and I mean that's what I love about wood, and why personally I said I wasn't a purist from a woodworking tool perspective, but I am more of a purist when it comes to the grain. Like I stay away from stain if I can. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like changing the natural aspect of the wood, and I only use finishes that bring out basically the natural aesthetic of the wood species that I'm working with, and that's one thing that I do love about it, because I think you have the unique aspect of the designer, but then you have each grain pattern that's super unique, and so every single piece, even though the aesthetic lines might be the same, like is still unique because of the grain pattern that's on it, and I love that.
So, and that goes into finishes and stuff. So what do you use? Talk to me about
Yeah.
finishes.
So I mean, I generally separate things into light and dark woods. Um, from like a way to think about it, because on a dark wood you can use like an oil based finish. It brings out a lot of the natural elements of the wood, um, and it gives it a richness that is really great. And so I started using like a 3-and-3 mix for that. So and it also depends on what I'm making. So if it's like a coffee table or a dining room table is something that I'll see a lot of abuse, then a little bit more water resistance it will be needed, and just wear and tear. I mean, my 4-year-old son is a really great tester of furniture and of different finishes actually.
Right.
And our dining room table is actually one of those things where I tested out. Here's 4 coats of this 3-and-3 finish, and then, all right, how long does that last? And then here's, this a new one that I've been playing around with, and I've done a couple pieces. It's called Rubio Monaco, and it's an oil-based finish that I use on darker woods. And so now I'm testing that one out. Like, what does it look like? And a lot of it deals with, so Rubio Monaco, I have fell in love with. I like it a lot. It's monocoat, so it's one coat.
Oh, nice.
And it's zero VOC, so like you can just kind of use it indoors without worrying about like wearing a breathing apparatus. We still have your ventilation and everything, but it kind of smells like honey.
Oh, nice.
And it kind of looks like honey if you're using the pure version, but and you basically can like wipe it on or use a card scraper, not a card, like a plastic squeegee type of thing to apply it over flat surfaces, and it's one shot and you're done. And that's the one I'm actually testing out on my dining room table right now for Felix, and it's doing well so far. It's holding up. And yeah, so I lean that way for darker woods. And it's super simple. There's one coat, and it cures within like a week. So that's another part of finishes. There's how much time you allow to dry between each coat, and then the amount of cure time overall. If you're wanting to move through a lot of projects at one time, then if I have something that takes a while to dry, I'm not gonna and I'm a single room shop. I don't have a separate like finish room or
Right.
anything. So, if I make dust fly somewhere else and it gets in my finish, I can quickly ruin it. And so, finishes that cure fairly quickly, so I can keep moving on other projects are important. So, Rubio is nice that way. Um, Again, I've mainly used it on darker woods for like working on projects like maple. Maple tends to yellow, and it will over time, no matter what. Like it will yellow, but it can kind of be slowed down if you use like a waterborne finish. So I use General Finishes like waterborne finish and as a spray on application. So I use like an HVLP sprayer to be able to do that, to apply that, and it dries really fast, so it allows me to keep working and kind of finish it up in a day or so. And it leaves the wood at a nice light um, color that I like it, so it doesn't yellow,
Mm-hmm.
which and stuff. So that's that's kind of my two. So and I've also used like a 3 and 3, so which is like a poly oil and then a thinner, basically. So and mixed together and different parts. So I really like a next to grain finish. So it's not heavy and thick and plastic looking. I like it to really be next to the wood grain and bring out a lot of the features and texture of the wood. And so like an oil helps with that, getting it more next to grain. So um, and I use linseed oil usually when I'm mixing. I'll even use linseed oil just for simple finishes if it's not going to have a lot of wear and tear, and stuff. And then polyurethane, an oil and poly mix is really great with a thinner. It's just a wipe on finish. Super hard to screw up. You don't get streaking or anything with it. I hate using a brush or a sponge, and so I generally stay away from any sort of application that will require that. Just it seems so finicky to me that I just don't have the patience for it or something. So yeah, I generally will spray or wipe on any sort of finish. Is the main application type. So
Okay.
yeah.
Nice. Thanks. One last question.
Mm-hmm.
What's the if you could build that one perfect thing, what would it be? Or what's that aspiration? Maybe I got two questions maybe, but what's that one maybe piece of furniture that if you could build?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. So I I think so. I'll have a two-part answer for you. Uh, the first part is with anything, and I think even like in Gator Rom's like statement, he has like this. It's like design will be kind of thorough to the last detail, and it'll be honest and unobtrusive. Like there are different elements of what he says for a good design. Um, and I like that, like where you can like you know exactly what the piece is for. There's nothing that's in question about why it's there, and it has a certain amount of elegance because of that simplicity, but also like the beauty comes through that. Like I really enjoy that, and so I think with any piece that I make, I'm kind of striving for that, and I will just chuck away pieces that don't hit that for me. It's honestly why I have a hard time with doing like custom work inside of a particular thing, like in like built-ins and stuff like that are harder for me because I feel like it's harder to achieve that. Um, but and so there's that I try to hit with everything. So like if I can hit that with any piece of furniture, then I think like I'm happy with it. And I would love to do almost anything that I can hit that with. But I um, something that's really intriguing to me is like chairs, dining room table chairs,
Huh. Okay.
which I haven't actually done yet. But there there is such a design One, they're super practical, like, and super, like, I mean, super functional from like a base system. Um, there's just so much design aesthetic that can change in the chair design. That's really intriguing to me. There's a lot of complication in the joinery that
Hmm.
stands the test of time for a chair.
Right.
And so I'm slightly intimidated by it, which also makes me like want to make one even more.
Right.
And so I have a few chair designs that I'm working on. I haven't actually built, like, I mean, I've built some simple, like, benches and things along that line, but not like a full, like dining room chair with like a back and arms and everything. It's still like a design that I'm like working on. So, yeah. So it maybe seems kind of like lame, but a dining room table chair is really interesting to me, and stuff. So I really like through joinery, where you can see it and see how it was built, like when you observe it. Like
Right.
I really love that. Um, and you can do that a lot with a chair in different ways. Um, yeah, but like sofas also are sitting devices.
Right.
Like any sort of like thing that you sit on, I think is like interesting because there's just so many options there, and materials even like getting into like leathers or metals or
Uh-huh.
that kind of stuff. So too, but,
I
yeah,
had I had an idea. Maybe you can tackle it um, in your chair making.
yeah,
An adjustable dining room chair that's for adults, but also it raises up for your kids, and so they move
yeah,
down, and then as they move down and grow up, they have their adult chair, but it's the same chair they've been in, sort of like a high chair
yeah,
without all the railing.
yeah.
There you
No,
go.
it's I and that like that kind of stuff is really intriguing. Like how to do that while maintaining like its aesthetic
Right.
appeal is like super intriguing to me actually, especially with kids. Um, because you see this hideously ugly of like child like they just don't usually they aren't usually beautiful in any way, and so it's
There you
like
go.
they're usually really ugly, and so like that is a really intriguing thing. Or like small space design is also really interesting to me, like
Mm-hmm.
having something kind of be convertible, while maintaining its beauty, like is really interesting to me. Like I love just like uh, like I hope that my pieces, whatever they are, like inspire like something. And so like whether or not like the Mizovo dining room table like is like meant, like the meaning of it is like um, like togetherness and things along that line, like is meant what a dining room table is supposed to be. And so, like, any sort of thing that brings like life
Mm-hmm.
into what an environment. So
Yeah.
like, and yeah, that's really intriguing. But yeah, I'll think about that maybe. It's I gotta do it soon before my kids are already the size that they won't be growing any longer.
Right. Right. Yeah. Um, and I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but you had mentioned a couple of times about having some guys over and kind of doing like a little workshop on things. Um,
Yeah,
you want to talk about that?
yeah. I mean, it's that's one thing. So I came from Iowa, kind of. So when I kind of lost my job and everything, I was like, oh, let's just move back to Iowa where we have family and all that kind of stuff. Um, and and there was actually a really good woodworking community, and stuff. And then there's also a lot of like individual millers and different stuff. So that's one thing that is interesting moving actually here. I don't find that a lot.
Hmm.
A lot of people like to have the pieces, but not necessarily. Like I don't find a lot of woodworking community in the Front Range
Hmm.
here. And so a lot of it is like I think part of me is a teacher at heart. In a sense, like I love like seeing just like it click in people's mind. Like love that. Um, but I'm also, still would consider myself a pretty, um, I wouldn't say necessarily a novice, but the more you get into something, all of a sudden you like realize how large the field is
Right.
and how much better you can always make something. And so I think like I'm at that point where there's like you kind of realize like wow, you can go all the way over here, but and having a community of people all being able to come over and just like talk and you know join around like something, and like, yeah, just being able to come around and, like have a beer and talk shop and learn and have community, I think is a beautiful thing. And I would love to like, bring that into kind of the Front Range, which would be really great because it may be hidden, but I haven't been able to find a good source for it yet.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And if you're in the industry and haven't found it, then yeah, it may or may not exist, but hey, let me know how I can help. I'd love to come over and learn.
Yeah.
So
I was like, even all the coronavirus funness, it's like, I thought about it might even be easier to, to start because you can get, people on a Zoom call or whatever and
right.
just chat about different things. But
Yeah.
no, definitely. I mean, it's kind of one of my hopes for the summer, actually. So hopefully it's up and coming.
Yeah. That, well, more to come. We'll have to do a podcast about that later and see how it's going. Yeah. Hopefully all this will be over with by then and we can do that.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping to.
Any advice, tips, tricks for those getting into this, for those in it? Like, what would you encourage people to do?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think when I started out, I was really afraid of like, just like ruining this expensive piece of wood kind of, which, kind of makes sense, but I would say like, don't have that. The advice that the guy gave me early on of like, if you don't feel scared, then you're probably not pushing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think is kind of true. And things, but man, I mean, it's, there's a fire pit for a reason. Don't be afraid to like, screw up and, right. Like, it's not like, as long as you like learn something from it. I mean, this is kind of, lessons of life, I guess, but as long as you learn something from it, then great. And do it again. I would, but I mean, in that sense, like test cut, like test cut guys. I do a lot of times in something really complex, I'll do like 10 to 15 different test cuts until it's like just right. When I'm, fitting something or, fitting a joint together or something, like there's a lot of trial and error. And, I fail a ton. And so I, just keep going with it and celebrate the mistakes.
Yeah.
Keep going. But yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, that's super generic. I mean, you're like in that, phase of like interested and growing. I don't like, so if you have any specific questions, I guess on that, like, hey, what would be helpful for you? Like, let me know, like, what's the top of mind question for you, Major?
I have a question. What if your garage is not level? How do you level your table saw? Are you just going to shove some shims under the legs or what? If I'm trying to make an angle cut and my digital angle reader says 45, but my table saw is not at 45.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that's nice is that you can always like, leveling out your surface is kind of what's important to your material, right?
Right.
So you could have a table saw that's completely sitting at a 45, but as long as the blade to the table top is square, then you're good. So like a lot of the reference angles will have a zero out. So if you're zeroing out your reference point and then switching it to your blade to mark that 90, or just using a square, then you should be good. Because it's the reference point is kind of what's important there.
Right.
And yeah, but having products level, like, I mean, one of the things that's kind of a nervous thing when I'm shipping something, to a different area or climate, right. I'm taking, and especially like a bench or a table or something along that line, is like, are they going to get it and set it on their floor and it's going to wobble? Because like that makes me super nervous, because humidity levels change and maybe it like warps just a little bit, or some stuff like that is what keeps me up at night. And it's so I have a slab of granite, I guess. Like it's my island in my kitchen. That like on coffee tables and things along that line. Um, I will bring it to that, and I will make sure that it's completely stable, like all the way around. And then I will let it sit actually in different environments, like in high and low humidities, and retest its levelness to just adjust to that. Just because I don't like that's my worst. That's my worst fear is like you get something you spent a ton of hours on it, and then it shows up and it's like it doesn't seem stable or it doesn't
Yeah,
so,
that would be scary.
but that's I always set stuff on like you're interested in making a table, and part of that is having it probably not rock when you put
Right.
your coffee down on it. It's
Exactly.
kind of an important piece of the table.
Yep. Yep.
And so and then you always like there's little tips and tricks all the time. I usually will take on that flat surface that I know is completely flat, like my granite slab. Um, you can take a flat piece of sandpaper and set it underneath the leg that you think is high or long, and then circle it around just as it's sitting there, and then it just takes off a little bit, and you pull the sandpaper off and test the level again. If
Okay.
something's majorly off, then I'll take like a quarter or something, and trace around it, and then cut it off. Like I have it, I'll stabilize where I think is level on it, and then I'll take like a quarter and go around the leg so that I have a line all at the same height.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll cut at those marks. And I always make stuff, like a half inch, 10 inch longer, whenever I'm like lathing some legs or whatever, so that I have room to level it at the end,
Okay.
and make adjustments and stuff. So I never cut stuff. Well, I shouldn't say never. I don't cut anything that I don't have to at the final dimension until I'm ready to actually make it at the final dimension. So like my tables, you want them at a 29 to 30 inch height for dining room table. So I'll leave a little extra, maybe I'll do it at 30 and a half or something, and then cut that remaining while I'm on like a level surface that I know is going to be good for the final height. So, yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if I answered your question, Major.
You did.
Okay.
You
That's
did.
good.
No, you did. Thank you.
But
well, I should let you get back to your family.
yeah, they're enjoying the outdoors. So,
well, I really appreciate you spending time and taking time, and that means the world. Tell everybody before we go, your website, your Instagram, if you want to put your contact information out there, or I can just throw it in the show notes. I guess they can just message you through Instagram if they wanted to, but go for it.
Yeah, you bet. So my website is Woolly Furniture, WOOLLY furniture.com. And my Instagram account is Woolly, spelled the same way, _furniture. So you feel free to, give me a follow or shoot me a message. I have a contact form and contact information on those two places. So, I love, chatting about any ideas or anything that, I love talking about it. I was, mentioning briefly before, I think, we were recording for this, that, I don't actually, I'm a one-man shop and kind of a software. And so I love the opportunity to be able to talk about it, and think through other people's thoughts, because there's a million ways to do it.
Right.
So it's really interesting to, hear what people's ideas are and hear what people's designs are and everything. So
yeah. Thank you.
Hit me up.
Yeah, hopefully after we push this out and there's people out there in the Front Range area, northern Colorado, get in touch with Nate, and maybe once the band of social distancing is lifted, we can all get together and enjoy a beer and talk about woodworking and all that. So that'd be great.
That would be awesome. You can almost count on it. I'm pretty excited about doing that kind of thing. So.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again for coming on. You said earlier you are more scared of messing up really expensive wood in the shop. I'm more scared of losing a finger, but
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I do. Yeah, it's and you know, it's a really good point. You know, there's a lot of safety, things to definitely take. You know, and all of this stuff definitely. You know, it doesn't care whether or not it's your finger or a piece of wood for the most part, and
right.
so take all of those necessary safety precautions and things. So
Yeah, exactly. That's the best wisdom right there.
Yeah.
The best advice. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you coming on and sharing what you do and how you do it. And we're going to get this pushed out here hopefully today, if not today, tomorrow. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Major. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah. Thanks.
As always. I always love talking to you, Major. So.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And for reference, Nate and I are on a Zoom call. So we were trying to figure out the audio, what the best audio was before we started this. And so it's a Zoom call. So there we go. All right. I'm going to roll that outro. Thanks for joining us on the Creative Liberty Podcast. And thanks to Nate for coming on and talking about woodworking. Join us on our next podcast. I have no idea who's coming up next, but that's okay because these are the Quarantine Chronicles and we'll just get someone on next time. But until then, enjoy. Go check out Nate's Furniture at Woolly Furniture on Instagram, and you can reach out to him there. Like and follow and all that good stuff. Y'all know what the drill is. Until next time, see y'all later.